There's a game that's being played all the time, and if you look closely you can see it's right in front of your eyes. Understanding its rules can be the difference between living a life where you have the freedom to do what you want, or you struggle to make ends meet and have limited choices. They don't teach it at schools, so normally how it works is you only find out by maybe a fluke of birth, or when it's too late to be any real use. In this episode I'm going to be teaching you how to win the money game. So let's go over the rules of the game. Every player will take a different route through the game and have different starting stats, but in the end, how the game is played will be a result of their ability to control these three variables. I'm going to give you a brief overview of this now. So the first is assets. This is what you own of value. When you exchange your time for money, you may be able to use whatever is spare to purchase assets. If these are managed right, they can grow to the level which they can provide an income, or perhaps just being drawn down on safely, so this can let you control your own time. This is really important to understand. Assets are the key to being able to control your own time. Next is liabilities. These will inevitably be accumulated throughout the course of the game. The success you have at the game, however, depend on your choices about what to get into debt for and how you manage this. The aim of the game is to get into a position where there are enough assets and no debts. After that, the player can choose their own path and how they play the rest of the game. And the final one is time. Starting the game, you'll have to be aware that each player will have a finite time around the board. Each full turn tends to last roughly about the same time it takes the Earth to go around the Sun. I can tell you some averages, such as a male starting now may be expected to have 88 turns and a female 90, but never forget, the averages have no bearing on your individual game experience. There are some things you can do to try and increase your chances of more turns, but nothing is guaranteed, which is all the more reason to make sure you play the game well. Now there's a minimum cost to go around the board, which means when you start, your player will almost certainly be exchanging your time for money. What makes it even more difficult is each player will have different expectations on what is required for this minimum amount. But if you can start by controlling the money you get in exchange for your time and using what's spare to buy assets, you can start to move forward to becoming financially free. The beauty of the game is that there's no known finish line. Although for the purpose of this walkthrough, we're going to say that when a player has enough assets that they no longer need to exchange their time to pursue assets, they've won the game. So let's firstly go over assets. Your assets are crucial to understand, as if you cannot build assets, you'll never be able to have time freedom. To understand how assets are built, you need to understand first compounding. When your assets set up, managed right, and most importantly left to grow, they have an ability to multiply. If you don't use this to your advantage, then your chances of building assets are slim. Every player who has ever won the game has used this to their advantage, and you'd be fooled to miss this crucial game feature. Other players will constantly tell you what is and isn't right, often from a misinformed and misguided position. The choice on how to play remains yours, but there are some ways which have always worked. Building assets at its core relies on either businesses or bricks. For businesses, this is where the stock market comes in. This is the greatest wealth building invention the game has. If your investments are set up right, it allows you to tap into a mixture of the best minds of other players and the collective desire to win the game. You as a player have the privilege that you can access this at an almost insignificant cost. This was not the case for previous players. Other players might try and convince you that diversifying or concentrating your assets is the best way to win the game.
Diversification, that's for idiots.
We think diversification is, as practiced generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing.
The truth is, you can build your assets much quicker by focusing on one particular investment. That may work out for you, but remember, it could also destroy you. Diversification is not a protection against ignorance, it's an acknowledgement of uncertainty. The game at its heart is random and unexplainable, so managing these key elements is key to winning the game. If you can combine this with the right discipline and mindset, it is the simplest way to guarantee to build your assets. Losing money in a well-diversified mix of the best assets in the game has only been achieved by player error. I must warn you though, there is a cost to this upside. Each player will be desperately tested every 5 to 10 turns, where all other players will start selling their assets at rock bottom prices. This is a mistake that many players get caught up in time and time again. It may seem trivial to warn you of this now and to simply follow these rules, but trust me, when you're playing, it will feel anything but. So let's go over savings rate. Each turn a player goes around, they can control how much they use their exchange from time for money to put towards the player's asset growth. This is called savings rate, but it really should be called investment rate. At the start of a player's journey, their saving rate is going to have the highest impact on their ability to grow their assets. But at the end, because of the magic of compounding, it's their asset growth that has the far stronger impact. So let's go over liabilities. As a player, you will almost certainly build up liabilities across the course of the game, but it's important to separate these into two categories. There's productive liabilities. This is where your player uses their time advantage to purchase an asset which will grow in value. While at first glance it's against the point of the game to take on a liability, when combined with the time left remaining in the game, this on occasion can be a good move, as it can help build up assets in the long term. The next is unproductive liabilities. This is where a player takes on a liability for something that has no long-term value. Even these are necessary sometimes, as they're needed to improve the time spent playing, but the truth is they should be minimised where possible. And let's go over common player mistakes. There are ways to shortcut your asset building, but what it comes down to is the risk of going back to square one, or worse, square one with more debts and less turns on the game left. The choice of how you play will be yours, but please beware those who offer easy shortcuts. They come around constantly and are almost always there to provide a shortcut for wealth for them, not you. Every so often, the randomness of the game will mean a player will be unfortunate enough to lose their ability to earn and build assets, or worse, leave dependent players without support. Those who sing the praises of building assets without insuring against this disaster have no real idea how the game works. This is the single biggest mistake most players make. Every player thinks it will never happen to me. And finally, time. This is the most important feature of the game, as its quantity is unknown. Most players prefer to assume that they'll continue playing the game forever. At the start, your player's biggest advantage is an expectation of a higher amount of time. As the game develops, their stats build, but their time diminishes. All I'll say is that assets and liabilities can be rebuilt, but time cannot. The biggest trick of the game is the one which even the best players don't tell you, which is that while the point of the game may seem like it's to collect assets, this is a mistake. It's actually to have a mix of time and assets, so that your turns remaining can be played in a meaningful way. The regrets of former players before they completed the game was not that they wished they'd built more assets, but they wished they had the courage to play the game they wanted, that they hadn't worked so hard playing it, that they'd been happier, spent more time with other players, and that they expressed how they truly felt. Unfortunately, most players don't realise this until it's too late on in the game. The saddest trick about the money game is that it was never really about money in the first place.